Good afternoon, parents. Welcome to this Christian parenting course. My wife, Daisy, and I are happy to present to you this 4-session series that aims to lay the foundation of good parenting and family life. Just a quick note before we begin. Daisy and I will take turns giving portions of this session. Bear in mind, though, that we address you both as parents, not just as fathers separate from mothers. If we need to do so, we will emphasize it. Otherwise, when I speak, I address you all as fathers and mothers, parents together. I don't speak only as a father to fathers. Same is true with Daisy. When she speaks, she doesn't speak only as a mother to mothers. She speaks to fathers and mothers together as parents. Is that okay? Good. I want to start this off by saying that parenting is a huge topic, and certainly it deserves more than 4 short sessions. But there are many aspects and styles of parenting that change because our children change. They get older, we get older. And so, while we all are aware of these changing seasons, we can't possibly cover every aspect of parenting in a seminar like this. So, rather than tackle the nuts and bolts of parenting, what we will do instead, through these 4 sessions, is lay the foundations for Christian parenting, which are applicable for young families as well as for grown families. We believe that if we can get you to lay these foundations in your family life, you will have a much better chance of succeeding as Christian parents. At any rate, we do have a set of mini courses for parents that will help you in parenting your children well through the various stages in their lives. We encourage you to take them when they are available after you finish this course. Are we okay? Okay, let's begin. First things first. God provides us with a master plan or a basic principle for how to make family life work. You see, children who are left on their own cannot keep God's commandments. Do you agree or disagree? I believe they can't. They can't even know what they are by themselves. So God gave children a simple commandment with a promise. In Ephesians 6, verse 1 to 3, Paul wrote, "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise, that it may be well with you and you may live long on the earth." And by the way, God didn't command our children to obey and honor us parents just because we are the parents and because they would rather really obey and honor other people. No, the commandment was there because God had given parents, us, specific instructions on how to raise our children. God said, and I quote from Deuteronomy 6, "Teach the commandments diligently to your children and talk of them when you sit in your house and when you walk by the way and when you lie down and when you rise." God has placed us parents in charge of the raising and nurturing of our children in the ways and in the commandments of God, and our children are to obey and honor us. In other words, you're in charge. Mothers and fathers, you're in charge. Not their grandparents, but you. And not your children's school teachers, but you. And certainly not your children's friends, and most certainly not the media. And for some people that can afford it, not even the nanny. God holds no one else accountable for raising and nurturing your young children but you. Sure, you may send your children to school, hire a nanny, leave them with their grandparents for the summer, or park them in front of a TV all day long if you like. But, my dear parents, whatever the outcome is on your family and on your children, you parents and no one else are accountable before God for this outcome. Okay? Now that we know that God put us in charge, how does He want us to raise our children? And what's the goal we should set for our children? You know, it's good to raise children and to encourage them to aim for some lofty ambition even at a young age. In fact, psychologists claim that young children who have been encouraged by parents to strive for some lofty ambition end up being more successful and more accomplished than those whose parents didn't do that early on. Yet, And there's a big but. No matter how sound that may be, it's not enough. It's not enough. We have to remember that we are Christians. We are Christian parents. We don't strive only to be good parents. We have to be Christian parents as well. So as Christians, you and I, we all believe that we're meant to live forever with God in heaven and that Jesus Christ is the way to heaven. And so our goal should be to make our children reach out for that heavenly goal, that eternal goal of living with God through Jesus Christ. Paul says in Philippians 3 verse 14, I press toward the goal for the prize of the upward call of God in Jesus Christ. And remember what Jesus said in Luke chapter 9 verse 25. Jesus said, for what profit is it for a man if he gains the whole world and is himself destroyed? Jesus also said in Matthew 6, do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven. It's crucial, therefore, for us parents to emphasize eternal, heavenly goals for our children. But how do we do that? How do we accomplish this goal? Remember, it's God's will that we be transformed into new persons in the model of Jesus Christ. We know that. In Romans 12, verse 2, Paul wrote, don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. In Ephesians 4:24, he says, you must display a new nature because you are a new person created in God's likeness, righteous, holy, and true. And so this is our guide and our basis for raising our children. In our case, Daisy and I frequently remind our children to always watch their becoming, to be conscious of their character and their values. We emphasize to them proper character and virtues by talking about the good qualities we see in the stories that we read to them or the shows that we watch with them. We emphasize the good qualities we see in each other, especially when we honor one another during birthdays. We emphasize Christian virtue and character when we talk with them about the difficulties they encounter or the activities that they plan to do. We should therefore raise our children to be men and women of Christ in virtue and in character. That's what we're accountable to do as Christian parents. Anything short is not Christian parenting. You know, you can raise your children to achieve worldly success, to be Nobel Prize winners even, or a millionaire son or a daughter, a prominent position in society or business. If you do, then consider yourselves as good and successful parents. But if you haven't raised your children to have godly Christian character, then you would have failed as Christian parents, no matter how successful your children may be in the eyes of the world. We share this instruction with you, aware that the task of Christian parenting is enormous. Much of what we try to build on as parents are going to be influenced and tested by the rest of the world where our children grow up. Let me just focus on three of the strongest sources of influence on our children's behavior and attitudes and values. These are their friends, their school, and the media. Now, it would be nice to raise our children in the jungle where no one else can influence their behavior except what they learn from life itself and from us as parents. Unfortunately, we don't have that luxury. Our children are exposed to the rest of their little social circles and to the world. Every single element of society has the potential of influencing the little minds and hearts of our kids. Before we know it, they start behaving and developing attitudes that we know we hadn't taught them or that we didn't agree with as proper. And so we need to be extra cautious about this. My point is not to scare you into cloistering your children and sheltering them from the rest of the world. No, in fact, the world can teach our children a lot of good things, either from pleasant or even unpleasant situations. We shouldn't protect them from this world as much as we should prepare them for this world. We'll talk more about that in subsequent sessions. Our point today is to make you aware to take your roles as Christian parents seriously and proactively. If you don't raise them as your children in the ways of Christ, who is your Savior, then someone else will raise them up. And this person or those persons will influence your children in the ways of whatever it is they call their God, be it the world, the flesh, or themselves. Let me now ask Daisy to share with you some strategies in dealing with these three influences of friends, school, and media. Daisy?
Good afternoon. Let's start with media. Nowadays, media influence on children begins shortly after birth, particularly the media that comes through the television set and the radio. Then, at a certain point, the internet and the printed media. All sorts of people with all sorts of values are engaged in producing media of all kinds. Each of them hone their skills in order to catch the attention of anyone who happens to be paying attention. Each of them is aggressively competing with the other for our attention. And so, you can imagine how attractive and alluring they can get. And all this is readily and cheaply available, and it is accessible within the average household. Parents, therefore, need clear approaches here. Here are some important guidelines for us. 1. You need to establish guidelines for what media your children can make use of. And make sure you know and you have personally watched what it is that you are making them watch. Don't rely on advertisements or reviews of other people and other media guides. Study the programs yourselves and evaluate them. In Foundations Course 1, there was a talk on media, and they gave out a handout. We encourage you to discuss that in your husband-wife meeting and work on agreeing to some guidelines for your children. We will be handing out another copy of that after this session. We'll also give you more help in this area in our mini courses on parenting. 2. Now, listen. No matter how wholesome or correct the program is, it is a mistake to just keep the children glued on the TV set for long stretches of time. This passive entertainment hampers their social skills, their ability and desire to search for knowledge, and to try out things with their hands. We need to limit our children's use of the media, especially the television. There is a temptation to use the TV as a kind of babysitter, something to keep kids quieter and entertained while we go about other things. As much as you can, process what they view in media with them, especially when there are scenes where you know the proper values are not being promoted. Allow them to have a questioning attitude and ask them if they see is right, and then allow them to share with you openly what they think and feel. Then graciously guide them in what you believe is correct. A second worldly influence is the friends and peers of our children. The peers of our children, those who share the same common activity with them, for example in school, in sports, or in dance class, all have a powerful influence on our children's behavior and values. Eddie and I have 4 children. Our eldest is a boy, and the 3 younger ones are all girls. In each and every one of them, Eddie and I saw them go through a stage when they began to meet other people outside the family. This happened early during their elementary school age. When our kids began to develop friendships and ties, we saw how our kids wanted to be accepted by their friends. And part of this desire to be accepted was their desire to conform to what their friends wanted. When that happened, Eddie and I knew that our kids were most susceptible to influence by these peers whose acceptance they valued. Eddie and I also realized that, whether we like it or not, these friends and schoolmates of our children were raised by parents whose values and parenting practices did not necessarily seem aligned with ours. Often, our kids would complain whenever we would insist on doing things differently from them, and they would cry out saying, How come the parents of our children, of our friends, so and so, allow them to do this? Not only would their friends, parents handle them differently from us, these friends of our children would also be exposed to media and to other sorts of influences, good and bad. And so we are concerned, as you all should be, about the pressure from the peers of our children. Here are some guidelines that we've tried ourselves. The principles are simple, although implementing them have been a challenge. First, we promote good friendships for our children. We take advantage of being part of a community and promote friendships with community children because they come from families who want the same thing for their children that we want for ours. But we know our children are gregarious and they have many friends in school. So Eddie and I keep a watchful eye on who our children are relating to. We encourage their friends to come to the house and we mingle with them. When they have school activities, we make sure we attend and we introduce ourselves to their friends. And we get to know them as much as we can. Finally, we discourage bad relationships. Especially when they are still young, we inhibit our children from hanging around with the wrong kind of children. If they feel strongly about a certain relationship, we open ourselves to discussion and we help process this with them. By doing this, they begin to trust us and they become more aware of the standards that we set for them. The third main influence is the schools. All schools nowadays promote values and behavior patterns. They also discipline the children to various degrees. Sometimes, geography and family financial circumstances prevent us from having much choice in what school to send our children to. But whether we send our children to public schools or private Christian schools, we are actually paying a lot of money to these schools to influence the minds and hearts of our children. But even if we send them to what we might consider the best schools that our money can buy, we need to be watchful about the kind of values that they impart to our children. Even Christian schools can tend to be fairly secularized in their approach and not much better than secular schools. They also can have a worse influence on our children because they pass on secular values under the name of Christianity so that they can be harder for us to combat. Here again, we will offer you some guidelines that have worked for us. 1. You have to deal with the influence of the schools on the children. Just like in dealing with media and friends' influence, Eddie and I talk to our children regularly about what they are picking up from school from their teachers. We invite them to talk to us about what they like or don't like about their teacher or about the subjects being covered. In some cases, we allow them to evaluate what they learn in light of what we or the community might have taught them in the past, and we reinforce the good and process the bad. 2. We make time to be active in the school activities of our children. I myself have sat in all the PTAs of all my children. It has given me a chance to get to know their teachers well and let the teachers know what we value. And I find that this allows us to work together as partners in raising our children. 3. Eddie and I expose our children to other learning environments apart from school. We send them to all the youth events of our community. We allow them to join camps, university outreaches, and so on. We encourage their participating in various school activities as well, especially those involving teens. This way, their world will revolve beyond their relationship with their assigned teacher.
These three, therefore, the school, the friends, and the media, indeed are very strong influence on what your children become. Even if they're strong, if you build a strong and solid relationship of leadership and honor between yourselves and your children, then you, parents, would be and should be the strongest influencer of your children's character formation. Brothers and sisters, we're putting so much emphasis on these influences, because much of our children's character formation occurs in the context of daily life interactions with others. It's unavoidable, but to a large extent, if managed well, as we said earlier, it's helpful and even necessary. Part of the strategy is therefore to encircle our children with good influencers. Our children learn from their interaction with others. Just simply being with godly people has an effect on our children's character formation. So we should strive to surround our children with godly influences. We should be godly influences on our children ourselves. Remember, the first gospel that your children will read and learn from will be the gospel of your very lives as they see and experience it. Not only will our children be formed by staying literally close to us, we ought to take the opportunity whenever we can, both proactively and reactively, to teach and instruct them. As we quoted earlier, we are exhorted by the Bible to teach the commandments diligently to our children and to talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise. And like Christ with his disciples, we are surrounded by numerous teaching opportunities with our children. We spend a lot of time with our children every day, and various things come up, and we can point these out. When we see billboards and advertisements promoting the flesh and worldly values, these are opportunities to discuss with our children what is the Christian view on these things. And when Daisy and I see disorder in the streets because of, let's say, traffic or because of wastage, we can use this as gentle reminders about why the world is in such a state and encourage our children to think of ways so that they can respond to these situations in a Christian manner. Certainly, when our family come from church service, there are good opportunities to discuss our reactions to what the preacher or the priest said in his homily. But day-to-day instruction and teaching means that we need to give them our personal time as parents, and not just any kind of time. Not just teaching times either. We need to see that time includes doing and engaging yourselves in the right things, and doing it repeatedly so that it forms a pattern of life in the family. We will discuss family patterns in the next talk, but basically what we are referring to here include family meals together, family prayer time, celebrating the Lord's Day, celebrating special events and common activities together. It's the togetherness that is the key to establishing a family pattern. It takes time. It takes effort to carve out time, especially for older children. But I've learned that it all begins with the parents. If we parents are willing to make time and to enforce discipline in making time from the very beginning, this will work wonders. And these family patterns then are perfect occasions and opportunities to reinforce the values that we teach our children and to exert godly influence. Now, while we train our children and raise our children in the context of a family setting, we cannot and shouldn't do this alone. We need to introduce our children to an extended family or other genuine Christians. And I don't necessarily mean your own blood relatives and kin, but brothers and sisters in Christ in a Christian community, among whom you yourselves as parents have developed very strong, almost kinship ties. As Paul put in Ephesians chapter 2, he says, "Now therefore, you are no longer strangers and foreigners, but fellow citizens with the saints and members of the household of God." Community life provides some very valuable contributions to family life, contributions that can't be easily replaced by a family on its own. Community provides a social environment that supports our goals. It provides friendships and models for our children that support the very goals that we want for them. It provides youth programs and a youth peer group that supports our goals, and it gives us a chance to serve a common cause, individually and together as a family. You know, my children have appreciated and are delighted at the fact that we belong to a community that is different from the world. When they see us actively involved in service and in ministry, it gives them a strong sense of security. They know we're different and that our way of life is different. And when they see their lives, compare their lives with the lives of their friends in school, then they stand tall and are confident knowing that we have made the right choices. And they themselves become strong pillars among their friends, whom their friends are able to lean on for compassion, for grace, and for wisdom. Okay, so far, we've said that you parents are solely responsible and accountable to raise your children, focusing on heavenly goals and not just on earthly goals. We've also said that you are to teach them how to behave and relate in the family in a Christ-centered way by our very examples and in the context of family life and patterns of a Christian community. We also warned against the negative influence of schools, friends, and media. Allow me now to emphasize one important area of formation for our children. Following Jesus is hard enough. In Luke 13:24, Jesus says, "The road to heaven is narrow." And you and I know that. It's hard enough to live the way Christ wishes us to live. Harder still because of the way the world seems to make the road to hell seem nicer, smoother, more attractive, and more correct. For instance, nowadays, our society often promotes a very self-centered and even selfish orientation to our lives. They promote an attitude of insisting on my rights and what I deserve. Nothing seemingly wrong with that, especially when we hear stories of people being abused, people being maltreated, and so on. But the danger with this attitude is that if we carry it to an unnecessary extent, it goes against good relating in a charitable and in a humbling way with others. It doesn't promote the Christian value of service and sacrificial love. In fact, the world has given martyrdom a bad name. Much of the world doesn't produce heroes and saints anymore. Rather, they produce rock stars, screen idols, entertainment icons. Now, how do we counteract this? Let us share with you 3 ways that have worked for us. First, we need to raise our children to have grateful hearts. Grateful hearts. In our family, Daisy and I emphasize thankfulness in our prayers, whether alone or in a family prayer. We manifest thankfulness in our day-to-day speech patterns. Even in simple matters, we express thankfulness. And when the kids grumble about something, we counter this with a sigh of thankfulness for other things. And so, they've learned to be thankful. We've learned to be thankful especially for things undeserved. And one of our family's favorite hymns is inspired by Psalm 8 entitled Emmanuel, where there's a line that says, "What are we that you have loved us so well?" So when you teach your children a sense of gratitude, you should then be able to develop in them a sense of responsibility to reciprocate for all the good and graciousness that they have received. And we notice that because our own children are thankful for the kind of life the community has taught us to live, it has become easy for them to serve others as they have been served. They're able to do this not just in the context of community, but also in the context of their own circle of friends and school activities. They have seen us volunteer our times readily for others, whether in their school's parent activities or in the context of community. And when they see us doing this, they see it as a natural and gracious thing to do themselves. They volunteer quite readily to help, to step up to do group work in school, to take photos in our gatherings, to perform on stage if they are called to, and so on, because they have seen volunteer work in the context of community. Certainly, when we go on outreach activities in homes for orphans, for abandoned children, and so on, they are in the forefront, our children, grateful for what they have and responding in kindness to others. The second way to counteract self-centered tendency is to foster a sense of belongingness. A sense of belongingness. We encourage our own children to join school activities. Our son joined the swimming team of their school. Our daughters joined the tennis team and their cheer dancing team. These kinds of memberships give them a sense of belonging to a bigger group. And I'm thankful for my brother who gave a nickname to my family. He called us the Edsters. And we've used that often and with pride. Somehow, this simple nicknaming device has given the Edsters a different sense of identity and bonding. We encourage discussion about our citizenship, about our church, about our community. We engage our children's minds in thinking that we are part of something bigger than ourselves and our family, and that we share in the responsibility of keeping the spirit and the vision of the bigger community in mind. Now, by pointing out these kinds of bonds that you have with a bigger group, by demonstrating to your children your own tireless effort in doing volunteer work in the bigger context of school or community or society, you will be able to make your children grow out of their naturally selfish shells and begin to take on responsible roles in society. And finally, we find that by exposing our children at an early age to environments involving interactions not just with their peers, but with older and also younger generations, this has given them opportunities to develop good social skills and allows them to be confident in dealing not only with their peers, but also with young and old alike. Again, here we are grateful for our way of life in community because this is a perfect setting where they can interact with a mix of age groups in a meaningful and personal way. Two final notes and then we're done. I'll say it again. Forming and teaching our children is not easy. They have their own human tendencies to be selfish and self-centered, and when they're exposed to the outside world, through media, through school, through their peers, what we teach them is challenged and is different from what they see that seem to work well in the outside world. And so it's a constant tug of war between what you know and teach that is right and what they feel and they discover in the world that looks right but is different. The investment here is heaviest while your children are young and formative. So spend a lot of time forming your children while they're still young. And if you make the proper investments early enough, then the work becomes light as they grow up and mature. They will still be challenged, of course. They will still experiment, but with proper foundations laid while they're young, and by getting them to enjoy your company and the company of people who care for them genuinely, then they will be able to deal with the world properly. And these last 2 points that I'll make will provide a couple of pointers on how to survive this tug of war victoriously. In the scripture, we find many passages that uphold both law and grace. Law and grace. On the one hand, the Lord himself said in Matthew 5, "Don't think that I came to destroy the law of the prophets." And then we find Hebrews 4 exhorting us to go to the Lord for help, saying, "Let us therefore come boldly to the throne of grace that we may obtain mercy." We can expect both law and grace from the Lord himself, both at the same time. First of all, therefore, children need clear rules or standards. They need the law. You can't go about punishing your children, say, if you haven't been clear about what is and what is not allowed behavior. Don't punish your children unless they know the rules to begin with. But once you have laid and explained the rules and standards, then you have to wield authority. Now here, 2 guidelines are what we'd like to share with you that has worked for us. First, we should aim to be reasonably strict. Reasonably strict. Being strict means that we uphold the rules and insist on them being followed. Now, we should use wisdom and discernment, however, in deciding when to be strict and when not. In matters of importance, such as in matters of morality, we must be strict. In our family, we don't tolerate lying, we don't tolerate cheating, we don't tolerate disobedience and disrespect for elders. And we don't tolerate disrespect for the small ones either. There are no gray areas in these matters. In other important areas, we are clear and firm, but we make room for exceptional circumstances. Number 2, we need to be reasonably firm and consistent. And now, here again, the word reasonably is an important word. It's important to emphasize and to enforce the standards and rules that we have set. If we don't, then we'll just teach our children that they can ignore standards and rules. And if they want, they can get away with it. And that will not be helpful for them. We can, however, make exceptions. But we make exceptions only for a good reason. In our family, we allow our children to make a respectful appeal whenever they think they can abide by what we enforce on them. If they think we're not applying the rules and standards right, or if they see something in the circumstances that would indicate a different approach. Sometimes they will be right. But we want to teach them that as parents, as their parents, like their God, we are open to reason. Now, one appeal we don't tolerate from our children, however, is an appeal based on what they see other families doing. And again, because I was confident that they had already believed that it was a good thing that we were a different family, it was always easier for us to explain to them that we cannot go about doing things just because other families are doing the same things. Oh, by the way, consistency also means that we parents should model the rules and standards in our own lives. If we don't follow the rules and standards ourselves, we will be teaching our children that they can ignore the rule and law and get away with it themselves. At the same time, however, while we enforce the rules and we're strict with them, children need to experience our grace. Our grace. They need a personal relationship with us. There are time, communication, encouragement, and affection. They need affection even when they do not much want it. They need our forgiveness and our mercy, much as we need God's mercy and forgiveness ourselves. Now, when our children fail, I point out in their own language and at their level that they have failed. I don't lay a guilt trip on them, but I encourage them to realize their mistake and teach them what it means to be repentant. And when there's serious difficulty, we encourage our children to come before the Lord and seek His will and His grace. And here, Daisy and I model repentance as well. When we do wrong to our children, we apologize to them and ask for their forgiveness. And we affirm our resolve to do better. Finally, let me say it again, parenting can seem frightening and can seem very challenging, especially if you look at the range of parenting and all the challenges of parenting all at once. It can really be overwhelming. And as the way we're doing it in this course, it will look like, wow, parenting is such a difficult thing. It can also make us aware of the many ways that we fall short as parents, and that can be really discouraging. Here we need an exhortation from 1 Peter chapter 4. He says, "Above all, hold unfailing your love for one another, since love covers a multitude of sins." Hold unfailingly your love for one another. If we love our children, that will make up for a lot of things. We can't be perfect parents, but we can love our children. And if the children are confident that they are living in a loving family, they can handle many things in family life that are not perfect without being harmed. And that will be a valuable lesson for the rest of their lives. I have ministered and discipled enough parents to know that their deepest prayers have always been for their children, as it should be. But as we pray for our children and pray to God that our children will be surrounded by the right environment, we will gain, and that they will gain the right experiences and will be protected from harm, I urge that you turn a little bit of that prayer to yourselves and that you ask the Lord for wisdom, for courage, and love to serve your children as Jesus would. God, in the final analysis, is the one who can bring your children to where they should be. We can only do so much. In thankfulness, we need to pray that God will bless what we do, that He will teach us how to do better, and that He will do the things that we fail to do. God bless you all.